This student got the scare of his life. He thought the paraglider had completely collapsed and that he was about to crash violently to the ground. However, just seconds before impact, he felt something hold him back, his reserve parachute. The whole incident happened because he hadn't checked his reserve parachute before takeoff. The safety pin was loose, so while flying, the reserve slipped out of the harness and deployed without him realizing it. That's why, when the parachute fully opened, it pulled the paraglider forward, causing a total collapse. Exactly what the student saw and felt without understanding what was happening. If you don't want your reserve to open accidentally, like it did for this student, you must follow these tips. Check the reserve pin and the reserve handle. To avoid what happened to the student, we must inspect the reserve pin before flying because most harnesses have the reserve compartment in the back and the pins are usually located there too. Once we put on the harness, it's behind us, so we can't easily check it anymore. And many people forget. They put on all their gear and only then remember the reserve. But since they're already suited up, they just say, whatever, and take off. So, before even putting the harness on your shoulders, you must check the reserve and its pins. What exactly should we check? The most important thing is that the pin is well seated and secure. For example, if we see that the pin is barely in place, almost coming out, then the container can easily open, and the reserve will deploy just like it happened to the student. So make sure it's positioned correctly. Next, check the handle of the reserve. Most reserves use a Velcro system. If the Velcro isn't properly attached, the handle could hang loose and get snagged by a branch, or someone could accidentally pull it, causing an unintentional deployment. So even though the pin is the most important, the handle must also be well secured. Some systems have double pins, one on each side. In that case, make sure both are properly locked and the handle is in position. Some of these don't use Velcro, but instead have small flaps that hold the handle in place. If it's left hanging loose, it could get caught on something or someone and trigger the reserve. Modern harnesses are more sensitive. The more modern they are, the easier it is to extract the reserve, which is good because in an emergency, you can deploy it faster. But that also means they're more susceptible to accidental openings. So the newer the harness, the more careful you must be when checking and handling it, both on the ground and in flight. Sit in your harness carefully. From my years of experience, I've seen many cases where students, while trying to sit in the harness, whether by holding both brakes in one hand and grabbing the harness with the other, or by releasing the brakes and using both hands, end up grabbing or brushing the reserve handle. If that happens, the reserve could deploy right there. If your harness has the reserve handle close to the area where you usually grab to sit down, you must do it very cautiously. Ideally, get used to sitting by leaning your body back and lifting your knees, or by installing a foot stirrup, so you don't have to touch the area where the reserve handle is located. The size of the reserve matters. A few years ago, almost all reserve parachutes had a similar size and shape, like a brick. But over the years, new materials have made them lighter and more compact. However, many harness containers are still designed for the old, larger reserves. That means if you use a modern, smaller reserve, especially a lightweight hike and fly or ultralight model, the container will have extra space, and the reserve pin won't have enough pressure holding it. With little to no tension, the pin might slip out just from the movement during takeoff. If your reserve is too small for the container, you should fill the empty space with some foam or padding to create gentle pressure, just enough to keep the pin secure. But don't overdo it, because too much pressure can make the reserve hard to extract in an emergency. You must find a balance, filling the container to its intended volume. Be careful when connecting your speed bar. A serious mistake some pilots make is routing the speed bar line through the reserve handle by accident. This causes two major problems. First, in an emergency, you won't be able to throw the reserve because it'll be tangled with the speed bar line, and it may open too close to you or even get tangled with your wing. Second, when you accelerate, you could accidentally pull the reserve handle and open it mid-flight. Both situations are extremely dangerous, so a small oversight like passing the speed bar line through the reserve handle can have severe consequences. Also, be careful with helpers. Sometimes someone unfamiliar with paragliding tries to help you carry your harness and sees the little handle. It looks perfect for grabbing. They pull it with good intentions, but end up opening your reserve. Now your flight is ruined and you have to pay to get it repacked, which can be expensive. Even worse, if they pull it and you don't notice, if the pin was released but the handle looks normal, you could take off like that, and the reserve might open mid-flight, leading to an accident. So, whenever someone else helps you carry your gear, pay close attention to how they handle it and always recheck your reserve afterward, even if you're not going to fly that day. Because if that person accidentally pulled the handle, the pins might already be open, and the reserve could deploy during this flight or the next one.